Heaven as an ordered, sacred realm. Close your eyes, and imagine a place beyond the stars. A place of perfect order, where everything exists exactly as it should. This is the vision of heaven that ancient peoples held, not as clouds and harps, but as something far more structured, far more intentional. In the texts written during the Second Temple period, when the Great Temple still stood in Jerusalem, scholars and mystics contemplated the nature of the divine realm. And what they saw, in their minds and in their prayers, was a temple. Not just any temple, but a vast, cosmic sanctuary that stretched beyond human comprehension. Picture it now. Chamber after chamber, hall after hall, each one more sacred than the last. Golden light filtering through spaces that exist beyond physical space. And in these chambers, angels. Not the gentle, passive beings of later tradition, but servants, priests, each one with a role, each one with a purpose. These angels move through the heavenly temple with the same careful reverence that earthly priests showed in Jerusalem. They tend to sacred fires that need no fuel. They arrange offerings that never decay. They sing praises that have echoed since before time began. The ancient writers understood something profound. They saw that if heaven was God's dwelling place, then it must be organized like the most sacred space they knew, the temple. And if the temple on earth was holy, how much more holy must be its heavenly counterpart? This wasn't just poetry to them. It was cosmology, theology, a way of understanding how the universe itself was structured. The earthly temple, with its outer courts and inner sanctums, its holy place and most holy place, was a mirror, a reflection, a shadow cast by a greater reality. When a priest walked through the temple in Jerusalem, trimming the lampstands, burning incense, arranging the showbread, he was participating in something cosmic. He was echoing the movements of angels in the heavenly temple, performing a ritual that existed in two places at once. Think of it like this. Imagine standing between two mirrors, seeing your reflection stretching infinitely in both directions. The earthly temple and the heavenly temple were like that, each reflecting the other, each making the other real and meaningful. The book of Exodus hints at this when God shows Moses the pattern for the tabernacle. See that you make everything according to the pattern shown you on the mountain. What pattern? The heavenly pattern. The true sanctuary of which the earthly one would be a copy. This idea ripples through ancient Jewish thought. In the visions of Ezekiel, in the mystical texts of Enoch, in the writings found among the Dead Sea Scrolls. Again and again, this image of heaven as temple, of angels as priests, of divine service that never ends. And there's something deeply comforting in this vision, isn't there? The idea that before anything went wrong in our world, before any rebellion or fall, there was order. Perfect, beautiful, eternal order. A place where everything functioned exactly as it should, where every being knew its place and performed its sacred duty with joy. The angels in this heavenly temple weren't confused. They weren't anxious or uncertain. They simply served. And in that service, they found their purpose, their meaning, their peace. Each class of angels had its own chambers, its own responsibilities. The cherubim, guardian figures with their wings spread, protecting the most sacred spaces. The seraphim, burning ones, singing endless songs of holiness. Other orders, names we've lost or never knew, each performing their eternal tasks. And the temple itself. Think of its vastness. Chambers extending in directions that earthly geometry cannot contain. Courtyards where thousands upon thousands of angels gather. Holy places stacked upon holy places, all centered on the throne, the presence, the source of all light and life. This is the starting point of the story, the baseline, the way things were meant to be. Order, purpose, harmony. A cosmos organized around worship and service, where every being, from the highest angel to the smallest spark of creation, knew its place in the grand design. And somewhere in this heavenly temple, in its outer courts perhaps, or in its gardens, was humanity's place too. Not yet realized, but intended, planned. Human beings were always meant to fit into this cosmic order, to join this eternal worship, to find their own sacred role in the dance of creation. The temple above and the temple below, heaven and earth, divine and human, all connected, all part of one great pattern, one sacred architecture that held the universe together. Let this image settle into your mind as you rest. This vision of perfect order, of purposeful beauty, of a cosmos functioning exactly as it should. Before the fractures, before the falls, there was this. Heaven as temple, angels as priests, everything in its right place. And in knowing this, in understanding that such order once existed, and in some realms still does exist, we find a certain peace, a certain hope, that beneath the chaos we sometimes see, there is structure. Beneath the confusion, there is meaning, and that the ultimate reality, the deepest truth of existence, is not disorder but harmony, not chaos but sacred order, eternal and unshakable. Rest now in this vision of the heavenly temple. Let it calm your mind. Let it ease your thoughts. Perfect order, eternal peace, everything as it should be. Angels meant to honor humanity. In the beginning, in that perfect order we've been contemplating, there was a plan, a hierarchy, not of oppression, but of beauty. A cosmic arrangement where every being had its place, and every place had its dignity. And at the heart of this arrangement was something surprising, something that the ancient texts reveal to us in whispers and hints. Angels, those magnificent beings of light who served in the heavenly temple, were meant to honor humanity. Let that thought rest in your mind for a moment. These cosmic beings, these servants of the divine, were not meant to be humanity's masters, but humanity's servants. Not our rulers, but our attendants in the grand design. The story of Enoch helps us understand this. Enoch, the seventh from Adam, the one who walked with God. The ancient texts say of him simply, "He was no more, because God took him." Translated, lifted up, brought into the divine presence while still living. And when Enoch arrived in heaven, according to the later traditions, something remarkable happened. The angels, those same beings who served in the heavenly temple, bowed before him. They showed him honor. They treated this human being, this mortal man, with a reverence that astonished even Enoch himself. Why would they do this? What could possibly justify such an act? The answer lies in an older memory, a deeper tradition. The angels remembered Adam, the first human, and they remembered that they had been commanded to honor him, to recognize in humanity something precious, something that bore the divine image in a way even they did not. Picture the scene in your mind. Enoch, overwhelmed, standing in the heavenly courts, and around him, beings of pure light, creatures of immense power and ancient wisdom, bowing low, acknowledging him, welcoming him not as an intruder, but as one who belongs, who has a right to be there, who deserves their respect. This wasn't about Enoch being better than the angels. It was about something deeper. It was about the role humanity was meant to play in creation. Angels, for all their glory, were servants. Holy servants, yes. Powerful servants, certainly. But servants nonetheless. Humanity, though seemingly smaller, weaker, more limited, carried something else. The image, the likeness, a reflection of the divine that was meant to grow, to develop, to become something the angels could only witness and celebrate. The ancient rabbis pondered this mystery for centuries. Why should angels, who never sinned in the beginning, who never fell from their first estate, who served faithfully in the cosmic temple, why should they bow to humans, to creatures made of dust? And they understood it this way. Angels are what they are, fixed, eternal, unchanging. A cherub is always a cherub. A seraph is always a seraph. But a human can grow, can change, can choose, can become. This capacity for transformation, for spiritual growth, for freely chosen obedience, this was precious beyond measure. The angels served God because it was their nature. Humans could serve God because they chose to. And choice, free choice, had a value all its own. So when Enoch appeared in heaven, transformed by his walk with God, elevated by his righteousness, the angels saw in him the fulfillment of the original plan. Here was a human who had chosen well, who had walked the path of holiness, who had become more, and they honored him for it, not because he was powerful, but because he was faithful, not because he was impressive, but because he was obedient. He represented what humanity was always meant to be. This theme echoes through the ancient texts in different ways. In some traditions, the angels rejoice when humans do good. They celebrate human righteousness as if it were their own victory. Because, in a sense, it is. When humans fulfill their purpose, the whole cosmic order is validated, confirmed, made complete. Think of it like a great orchestra. The angels are the instruments, each one perfect, each one in tune, playing their parts flawlessly. But humanity? Humanity is meant to be something else in this symphony. Perhaps the melody, perhaps the conductor, perhaps something even more central. And when a human being, through obedience and faithfulness, steps into their rightful role, the whole cosmos breathes easier. The music becomes what it was always meant to be. The angels can properly play their supporting role, because the lead part is finally being performed. This is why the angels could bow to Enoch without shame, without diminishing themselves. They weren't acknowledging his superiority. They were celebrating the restoration of proper order. Here was a human being who was being human the right way. And that deserved honor. The tradition says that Enoch became a near-cosmic figure, that he was given knowledge, authority, even a throne in some versions of the story. The angels didn't resent this. They welcomed it, because this was how it was supposed to be. Imagine living in a world where such honor was the norm, where the powerful ones, the wise ones, the ancient ones bowed before the simple act of human faithfulness, where your choice to do good, to walk in righteousness, to seek the divine, was recognized as the precious thing it truly is. This was the original hierarchy. God above all, angels serving God, and humans. Humans elevated by their obedience, honored by the angels, growing into their cosmic role, becoming what they were always meant to become. It's a beautiful vision, isn't it? Not a hierarchy of domination, but a hierarchy of love, where every being serves every other being, where the angels serve God by honoring humans, where humans serve God by becoming fully human, where everything works together in harmony. And Enoch stands as proof, as a sign, that this vision is not impossible, that a human being can walk so closely with the divine, can grow so fully into their intended purpose, that even angels recognize it and bow. Before the fractures came, before the rebellions and falls, this was the intention. Angels honoring humanity. Not grudgingly, not resentfully, but joyfully, because in honoring faithful humans, they honored the one who made humans in his image. This is the proper order, the right relationship, the way things were meant to be. Angels serving God, humans elevated by obedience, all working together in cosmic harmony, each honoring the other, each celebrating the role of the other, each finding their place in the eternal dance. Let this truth settle into your spirit as you rest. You are meant to be honored. Your faithfulness matters. Your choices have cosmic significance. Even the angels, in the original plan, were meant to celebrate your growth, your transformation, your journey toward becoming fully human, fully alive, fully yourself. Rest in this. Rest in the knowledge that you are valuable, that your life has meaning, that the universe itself was designed to support your flourishing. And sleep, peaceful in the understanding that this is your inheritance, your calling, your destiny. The rebellion of heavenly beings. But something went wrong. In the perfect order, in the harmonious hierarchy, a fracture appeared. Not in the foundation, but in the choice of some who served there. The first crack in the cosmic temple. The ancient texts speak of the Watchers, A group of angels, sent to watch over humanity, to guard, to guide, to help the young human race find its way. They had a sacred duty, a holy purpose. But something happened to them as they watched. They began to want, to desire, to crave what was not theirs to have. The Book of Enoch tells this story in vivid detail. 200 angels, led by one named Shemahaza, looked down from their posts in heaven. And they saw the daughters of men, and they found them beautiful. And that beauty stirred something in them that should not have been stirred. They made a pact among themselves, an oath, because none of them wanted to be the only one to take this terrible step. They would fall together, or not at all. There's something almost pitiable in that. Even in their rebellion, they sought community, companionship in their sin. And so they descended. These watchers, these guardians, left their proper dwelling place. They took human wives. They taught secrets that were not meant to be shared. Secrets of metallurgy, of weaponry, of cosmetics and adornments, of sorcery and root-cutting and astrology. They had abandoned their role, their sacred purpose in the cosmic order. Angels who were meant to honor humanity, instead corrupted it. Beings who were meant to serve, instead sought to possess. But the story doesn't end with them walking free. The ancient traditions are clear about this. There were consequences, divine judgment, and that judgment was strange, terrible, appropriate. The watchers were imprisoned, but not cast down to some distant hell. Instead, they were kept in heaven itself, under guard, confined, awaiting final judgment. Imagine that. The heavenly temple, that place of perfect order, now containing within it a prison. A place where fallen angels were held, restrained, unable to complete their fall. Some traditions place them in the second heaven, or the third, or the fifth. The numbers vary, but the image remains consistent. Somewhere in the cosmic structure, there is a chamber, a place of binding, where these rebellious watchers are held. And here's where the story becomes even more peculiar. These imprisoned angels, these fallen watchers, retained enough awareness, enough of their former nature, to feel remorse, to recognize what they had lost, to long for forgiveness. When Enoch travels through heaven in the ancient texts, he encounters them, and they beg him, implore him, ask this righteous human to intercede for them, to plead their case before the throne, to ask for mercy on their behalf. Think about the irony of that. Angels who were meant to honor humans, now begging a human for help. The hierarchy completely inverted. Not in the right way, not in the beautiful way we discussed before, but in a tragic way, a broken way. And Enoch, faithful Enoch, goes before God on their behalf. He asks, he pleads, he makes the case for mercy. But the answer comes back. No. There will be no forgiveness for the watchers. They knew what they were doing. They understood the cosmic order they were violating. And there is no path back for them. So they remain imprisoned, guarded, waiting for the day of final judgment. Still in heaven, but no longer part of its harmony. Present in the temple, but cut off from its service. Seeing the glory, but unable to participate in it. There's something deeply sobering about this image. These beings who had everything, who served in the presence of the divine, who knew perfect joy and purpose, threw it all away. For what? For desire. For wanting what was not theirs. For stepping outside their appointed role. The ancient rabbis contemplated this mystery. How could angels sin? How could beings who knew God so intimately, who served so closely to the throne, choose rebellion? What could possibly motivate such a choice? Some said it was pride. These watchers thought they knew better than the cosmic plan. They saw themselves as wise enough to chart their own course. Others said it was envy. They saw the freedom humans had, the ability to choose, to love, to create families, and they wanted that for themselves, forgetting that their own role was equally precious. Still others said it was corruption. That something in the act of watching humanity, of seeing human passions and desires, slowly warped their angelic nature, like pure water taking on the color of the vessel that holds it. Whatever the cause, the result was clear. The first fracture in cosmic order. The first break in the heavenly harmony. Angels who chose wrongly, and paid an eternal price for that choice. And now they sit, in their prison in heaven, surrounded by the glory they can no longer touch, hearing the songs they can no longer sing, watching the service they can no longer perform. Present, but absent. There, but lost. It's a cautionary tale, isn't it? A reminder that position doesn't guarantee faithfulness. That knowledge doesn't ensure wisdom. That proximity to the divine doesn't automatically produce holiness. These angels had everything, and they lost it through their own choice. But there's something else in this story, something almost comforting in a strange way. The fact that they're imprisoned, held under guard, awaiting judgment, means that evil doesn't have free rein. That rebellion has consequences. That the cosmic order, though fractured, still holds. God didn't ignore their sin, didn't pretend it hadn't happened, but also didn't destroy them instantly. They exist in a kind of suspension, a waiting place, where their story is paused but not yet ended. And the fact that they can still feel remorse, that they can still ask Enoch to intercede, suggests that even in their fallen state, they recognize what they've lost. They know the value of what they threw away. They understand, too late, the beauty of the order they violated. This is the first great fracture, the first tear in the fabric of the cosmos. Angels who left their proper place, who sought what was not theirs to have, who brought corruption into a world that was meant to be pure. But even in this tragedy, even in this fall, the story isn't over. The Watchers are bound. The damage they caused is being addressed. And the cosmic order, though wounded, continues. This is how evil enters the story. Not as an equal opposite to good, but as a parasite, a corruption, a choice made by beings who should have known better. And the response to that evil? Not chaos, but judgment. Not abandonment, but imprisonment. Not the end of order, but its painful preservation. The Watchers fell, but they didn't escape. They rebelled, but they didn't win. They're held now, under guard, in heaven itself. A reminder that even fallen angels remain under divine authority. That rebellion, for all its bluster, is still subject to cosmic law. Let this thought bring you peace as you rest. That evil, though real, is not ultimate. That rebellion, though possible, is not final. That the fractures in reality, the breaks in cosmic order, are known, are addressed, are held in check. The Watchers wait in their prison. A reminder of the cost of abandoning one's purpose. But also a sign that the universe still has structure, still has law, still has a judge who sees, who knows, who acts. Rest now, knowing that the order holds. Even when fractured, even when broken, the cosmic temple still stands. And justice, patient and sure, continues its work. Corruption spills into the world. The fracture spreads. Like a crack in glass, what begins in one place doesn't stay contained. The rebellion of the angels, the fall of the Watchers, this wasn't an isolated incident. It was the beginning of a pattern, a template, a possibility that, once opened, could be repeated. And humanity, still young, still learning its place in the cosmic order, began to echo the fall it had witnessed. There's a story, a strange and haunting legend, that grew up around the Tower of Babel. You know the basic tale. Humanity united, speaking one language, building a tower that reached toward heaven. An act of pride, of rebellion, of wanting to storm the gates of the divine realm itself. But some of the later traditions add details, darker details, that help us understand how deeply the corruption had spread. They say that some of the builders, the leaders of this great project, didn't just want to build a tall tower. They wanted to wage war, to fight against heaven, to overthrow the cosmic order entirely. Angels had fallen from heaven to earth. Now humans would rise from earth to heaven, not as invited guests, but as invaders. It's almost hard to imagine, isn't it? The hubris required to think such a thing possible. To believe that human hands, human weapons, human strength, could challenge the throne itself. But that's what corruption does. It distorts perception. It makes the impossible seem achievable. It whispers that limits are just suggestions, that boundaries are meant to be crossed, that rebellion is really freedom. So they built, and they planned, and they schemed. These architects of a war against heaven. And God looked down, and saw, and responded. But not with the destruction they perhaps deserved. Instead, with something more subtle, more appropriate, more transforming. The languages were confused. Communication broke down. The great project collapsed. But according to the legend, some of the builders, the ringleaders, the ones who had most wanted to fight God, received a special punishment. They were transformed, changed, turned into something between human and spirit. Visible, yet invisible. Present, yet hidden. They became what the later tradition calls She-Dim, a class of demons. Think about what this means. These were humans once. They had human thoughts, human desires, human bodies. But their rebellion, their desire to storm heaven and fight God, twisted them, changed them into something else. The She-Dim retain human characteristics. They're not like the fallen angels, not cosmic beings of pure spirit. They're something more mundane, more familiar. They remember being human. They retain human tendencies, human hungers, human resentments. But they're also invisible now, unable to be seen by normal eyes, unable to interact with the world the way they once did. They exist in a kind of shadow realm, present but hidden, aware but disconnected. And this transformation is itself a kind of judgment. They wanted to ascend, to rise, to become more than human. Instead, they became less. Not angels, not even fully human anymore. Just She-Dim. Harmful spirits. Beings associated with disease and misfortune. Do you see the pattern forming? The angels fell because they wanted what humans had. Now humans have fallen because they wanted what angels had. The rebellion mirrors itself, repeats itself, each fall echoing the last. And just as the Watchers brought forbidden knowledge to humanity, teaching what should not be taught, so now these transformed humans, these She-Dim, bring harm and misfortune to the world they once belonged to. The ancient peoples believed that She-Dim caused illness, accidents, bad luck, all the small disasters that plague human life. A child's fever, a wound that won't heal, a business that inexplicably fails. Behind these common troubles, the She-Dim were at work. And there's something particularly tragic about this. These demons weren't foreign invaders. They weren't alien entities from some dark realm. They were neighbors, family members, fellow humans, who chose rebellion and paid the price for it. Human rebellion now mirrors angelic rebellion. The pattern is complete. The corruption that began in heaven has now fully infected earth. Above and below, angels and humans. Both have chosen badly. Both have fallen in their own way. And the world is left to deal with the consequences. A reality now populated not just by humans and animals, not just by angels in heaven and people on earth, but by these in-between things. These transformed rebels. These She-Dim. They haunt the borders of human experience. Invisible but present. Unable to be fully part of the world. Unable to leave it either. Trapped in a state of their own making. Forever cursed by their choice to rebel. The rabbis who told these stories understood something profound. Sin doesn't just affect the sinner. It transforms them. Changes their very nature. The Babel builders wanted to become like gods, and instead became demons. They reached for glory and grasped corruption. This is the terrible logic of rebellion. It promises elevation, but delivers degradation. It offers freedom, but creates bondage. It whispers of transcendence, but produces only transformation into something lesser. And now the pattern is clear. The template is established. Beings who abandon their proper place in the cosmic order don't move up. They move sideways, into shadow, into confusion, into a state of perpetual incompleteness. The Watchers in their heavenly prison, the Shiddim in their invisible exile, both paying the price for wanting what was not theirs, both suffering the consequences of thinking they knew better than the cosmic plan. And between them, ordinary humanity, still learning, still choosing, still capable of either path. The path of Enoch, who walked with God and was elevated by angels, or the path of the Babel builders, who tried to fight God and were diminished into demons. Every generation faces this choice. Every person walks this edge. Will we accept our place in the cosmic order? Or will we rebel and face the transformation that follows? The stories don't tell us these things to frighten us, but to warn us, to help us see the pattern, to understand that rebellion has a cost, and that cost is always higher than we think. The Shiddim wander now, remnants of human pride, living warnings of what rebellion produces. Not glory, but shadow. Not transcendence, but transformation into something hollow and harmful. And yet, even in this dark development, the cosmic order continues. The Shiddim exist, but they don't rule. They cause trouble, but they don't determine destiny. They're a problem, but not the ultimate problem. A corruption, but not the final word. The world goes on, now more complicated, now more dangerous, now haunted by invisible beings who remember being human and resent what they've become. But the temple still stands in heaven. God still reigns. And the possibility of choosing well, of walking like Enoch, of finding our proper place, still exists. This is the moment where corruption fully spills into the world, where human rebellion mirrors angelic rebellion, where the fracture becomes a pattern. But it's not the end of the story. Only another chapter, another warning, another chance to choose differently. Let this knowledge settle as you rest. Understand the cost of rebellion, but also understand that you still have a choice. The path of Enoch remains open. The way of honor and obedience still exists. And the cosmic order, though fractured, still holds you in its care. Sleep now, aware of the shadows, but not afraid of them. They are real, but they are not ultimate. And you still have the power to choose your path. Chaos settles into everyday life. And then, something shifts. The story moves from the dramatic to the mundane. From cosmic rebellion to daily irritation. From fallen angels and transformed humans to smaller troubles. Persistent troubles. The kind that don't make for grand tales, but that fill ordinary lives with frustration. Evil, it seems, doesn't always announce itself with thunder and towers. Sometimes it just settles in, becomes part of the background, turns into 1,000 small problems instead of one large catastrophe. The rabbinic texts speak of Mazzikim, a word that means harmers or damagers. Not grand demons, not fallen angels, just nuisance spirits, invisible beings that cause everyday trouble. The stub of your toe, the cup that slips from your hand, the minor injury that takes too long to heal. They're everywhere, according to the traditions. Countless, innumerable, so many that if you could see them, the rabbis said, you couldn't bear to live. You'd be too aware of how crowded the world really is. How surrounded you are at every moment by these invisible troublemakers. Picture it. You're walking down a familiar street. Everything looks normal. But in the spaces between things, in the shadows, in the corners of your vision, there they are. Mazzikim. Thousands of them. Millions of them. Pressing in. Jostling. Looking for opportunities to cause small harms. It's almost comical, in a dark way. The cosmic drama of fallen watchers and transformed Babel builders has led to this. Invisible pests who knock things over and cause minor accidents. But don't mistake their smallness for insignificance. The Mazzikim may cause minor troubles individually, but collectively, they make life difficult. They wear you down. They turn every day into a series of small frustrations and inexplicable mishaps. And sometimes they escalate. A minor injury becomes infected. A small accident becomes serious. What started as an inconvenience becomes a danger. The Mazzikim, when provoked or given opportunity, can cause real harm. The ancient peoples took them seriously. Very seriously. They developed elaborate practices to avoid provoking the Mazzikim. Don't sit under a drain pipe at night. That's where they gather. Don't drink water that's been left uncovered. A Mazzik might have sipped from it and left something harmful behind. Don't walk alone at night if you can help it. Travel in groups. Carry protective amulets. Say the right prayers. Follow the proper procedures. All to keep these invisible nuisances at bay. And here's what's so striking about this. This is what evil has become in everyday experience. Not the grand cosmic rebellion of angels. Not the dramatic punishment of tower builders. But these persistent invisible irritants that you can't see but must always account for. Evil, chaos, corruption. It's settled into the fabric of ordinary life. It's become mundane, expected, something you plan around rather than something that shocks and horrifies. Your ancestors built a tower to fight God? That's ancient history. A dramatic story told around fires. But the Mazzik who caused you to trip this morning? That's immediate. That's now. That's the evil you actually have to deal with. This is perhaps the most insidious development yet. When evil becomes normal. When corruption is just part of the background. When you stop being surprised by small harms and just expect them. The rabbinic literature is full of advice on managing the Mazzikim. How to protect your home. How to safeguard your children. How to minimize the damage they can do. It reads almost like pest control, which, in a way, is exactly what it is. Spiritual pest control. Managing the invisible infestation that came from all those cosmic falls and rebellions. The Watchers brought corruption. The Babel builders became demons. And the result? Your daily life is now populated by countless invisible beings who want to cause you minor harm. It's exhausting, isn't it? This vision of a world so densely packed with hostile invisible entities. No wonder the ancients were so careful, so ritualistic, so concerned with proper procedures and protective practices. They weren't being superstitious, or at least, they didn't think they were. They were being practical. Responding rationally to what they believed was the true nature of reality. A world where evil had become ambient, environmental, as natural as air, and nearly as unavoidable. And yet, there's something almost manageable about this stage. Yes, the Mazzikim are everywhere. Yes, they cause constant trouble. But they're not unstoppable. They can be avoided, deflected, protected against. The cosmic order may be fractured, but it hasn't collapsed entirely. There are still rules, still patterns, still ways to live safely within a dangerous world. You just have to know the rules. Follow the practices. Stay alert. This is the stage where humanity learns to live with the consequences of all those ancient rebellions. Where we adapt to a reality that includes invisible harmers. Where we develop folk wisdom and protective traditions to navigate a world that's more complicated than it appears. The Mazzikim aren't going away. That seems clear. They're part of the furniture now. Part of the ecosystem. The invisible dimension of a fractured cosmos. But they're not in charge. They're not running things. They're just there. Being pests. Causing problems. making life harder than it needs to be. And people learn to cope. They share knowledge. Don't do this. It attracts Mazzikim. Always do that. It protects against them. The wisdom accumulates, gets passed down, becomes tradition. In a way, it's humanity at its best. Faced with a persistent invisible threat, we don't give up. We adapt. We learn. We develop strategies. We protect each other. We survive. But it's also humanity in a diminished state, isn't it? Compare this to the vision of humans being honored by angels. That was the plan. That was the intention. Humans elevated, celebrated, growing into their cosmic role. Instead, we're avoiding invisible pests, worrying about whether we've provoked a Mazzik, taking elaborate precautions against beings we can't even see. This is what the fall looks like in practical terms. Not just cosmic drama, but daily diminishment. Not just grand rebellion, but grinding irritation. The glory reduced to survival. The cosmic reduced to practical. And yet, we endure. Humans, stubborn creatures that we are, figure out how to live even in this compromised reality. Even in a world crowded with invisible harmers, we build families, create beauty, pursue meaning, live lives. The Mazzikim can cause trouble, but they can't stop human flourishing entirely. They can make things harder, but they can't make them impossible. They're a problem, but not the ultimate problem. This is the stage where evil becomes mundane, where chaos settles into everyday life, where corruption is just something you deal with, like weather, or insects, or any other natural challenge. It's not the world we were meant to have, but it's the world we've got, and we've learned, slowly, painfully, how to live in it, how to protect ourselves, how to minimize the damage, how to carry on despite the constant invisible harassment. The Mazzikim swarm around us, invisible but present, waiting for chances to cause small harms. But we've developed our defenses, our practices, our wisdom, and life goes on, more carefully than it might have, more cautiously, with more rituals and more awareness of unseen dangers. But it goes on. Let this thought bring you a strange kind of peace. Even in a world full of invisible harmers, life continues. Even surrounded by Mazzikim, humans persist. Even with chaos settled into the everyday, we find ways to thrive. The world is more complicated than it appears, more populated, more dangerous, but also more manageable than you might fear. There are ways to live well. Even here, even now, even with all these invisible troubles pressing in. Rest now, knowing that countless generations before you learn to navigate this complicated reality, that the wisdom exists, that the protections work, that you are not alone in facing the invisible challenges of existence. The Mazzikim are there, but so are you, and you, for all your limitations, have something they don't. Purpose, meaning, the image of the divine still within you. And that matters more than all their petty harassments combined. Sleep peacefully. The world is crowded, but you have your place in it, and that place is secure. The wilderness becomes haunted. Step outside the city, outside the village, away from human habitation and human noise. Walk into the places where civilization hasn't reached. The abandoned places, the ruined places, the wild places. And there, according to the ancient understanding, the spiritual atmosphere changes. The Mazzikim are everywhere. Yes, even in your home, even in crowded streets. But certain places, certain landscapes, attract darker things, stronger things, things that don't just cause minor troubles, but that embody desolation itself. The prophets spoke of these places. Isaiah, Jeremiah, describing what would become of cities when judgment fell. And their language is strange, haunting. They don't just say the cities will be empty. They say the cities will be inhabited, but not by humans. Wild animals will dwell there, and owls will fill the houses, and their satyr-like beings will dance. The Hebrew is ambiguous, hard to translate, but the image is clear. These ruined places won't be simply empty. They'll be occupied by something. The ancient imagination saw the wilderness, the wasteland, the ruins, as spiritually dangerous. These weren't just physically challenging environments. They were spiritually active, haunted, full of beings that didn't belong in the ordered world of humanity. Think about what a ruin represents. It's a place where human order has failed, where civilization tried to establish itself and couldn't sustain it, where the walls fell, the roofs collapsed, the gardens returned to thorns. A place where the boundary between wild and tame has dissolved. And in that dissolution, in that return to chaos, spiritual entities gather. They're drawn to it, to the absence of human presence, to the victory of entropy over order. Some of these beings are described as satyr-like, Seirim in Hebrew, hairy ones, goat demons, dancing in the ruins, celebrating the fall of human works, mocking the failure of civilization. Others are described as night creatures. Lilith is mentioned, dwelling in the wastelands, preferring the darkness and desolation to the light and order of inhabited places. These aren't the Mazzikim, those invisible pests that crowd into human spaces. These are beings that avoid human presence, that prefer the empty places, the forgotten places, the places where humanity has given up. And there's something deeply unsettling about this. The idea that certain landscapes are spiritually compromised, that geography itself can be haunted, that if you wander too far from human habitation, you enter a realm where other things dwell. The prophets used this imagery as judgment. Your city will become like this, empty of people, full of eerie creatures, a place where only demons dance and nightbirds cry. It was meant to be terrifying, and it was. Because this was the ultimate reversal. Humans were meant to spread, to fill the earth, to bring order and cultivation to wild places. But instead, wild places were reclaiming human territory. Chaos was pushing back against order. The spiritual entities of the wasteland were inheriting cities. Imagine standing in what was once a thriving city, Babylon, Jerusalem, any great metropolis. And now, it's silent. The buildings are crumbling. Vines grow through windows. And in the twilight, you hear sounds. Not animal sounds. At least not quite. Something else. Something that makes you want to run back to wherever people still live. The ancient world didn't have our concepts of ecology or natural reclamation. When they saw a ruined city, they didn't just see nature taking over. They saw a spiritual statement. This place has been abandoned by humans, and now it belongs to something else. The wilderness, in this understanding, isn't neutral. It's not just an empty canvas waiting for human cultivation. It has its own character, its own inhabitants, its own spiritual reality. And that reality is opposed to human flourishing. In the ordered world, the cities, the villages, the cultivated fields, humans maintain dominance. The Mazzikim cause trouble, but they're manageable. Prayer helps. Rituals help. Community helps. But in the wilderness, in the ruins, the balance shifts. This is their territory. The demons of desolation, the spirits of waste places, the beings that prefer absence to presence, darkness to light, entropy to order. And yet, humans sometimes must enter these places. Travelers pass through wilderness. Prophets go into the desert. Exiles wander in waste places. And when they do, they must be careful, vigilant, aware that they're crossing a threshold into a more dangerous spiritual landscape. The desert, particularly, holds a strange place in this cosmology. It's where demons go, where evil spirits wander seeking rest. The scapegoat, bearing the sins of Israel, was sent into the wilderness, to Azazel, to a wasteland spirit. This suggests something about the geography of good and evil. Ordered spaces are where humans and goodness can flourish. But the wilderness, the ruins, the desolate places, these belong to the other side. These are where the fallen things dwell. It's as if the cosmic fracture we've been tracing. Angels falling, humans rebelling, evil becoming mundane. This fracture has created not just spiritual consequences, but physical ones. Actual places on the map where the corruption is denser, more dangerous, more real. And ruins are perhaps the most tragic of these places, because they're evidence of failure. Human failure. These weren't natural wastelands. They were cities once. Gardens. Homes. Places where families lived and children played. But something went wrong. War came. Judgment fell. Plague struck. Whatever the cause. The humans left or died. And what moved in afterward? The beings that celebrate such endings. The spirits that prefer emptiness. The demons of desolation. This is the landscape now. Not just a world with invisible pests in every corner, but a world where geography itself has spiritual significance, where certain places are more dangerous than others, where the wilderness is actively hostile in ways that go beyond weather or wild animals. Physical desolation reflects spiritual desolation. This is the principle. Where human order collapses, spiritual disorder rushes in to fill the void. The ruins become haunted not metaphorically, but literally, actually occupied by beings that humans would rather not encounter. And this affects how people live. You don't wander too far from the village. You don't camp in ruins. You don't enter the deep wilderness unless you absolutely must. And when you do, you go prepared, prayerful, aware that you're entering dangerous territory. The world has sorted itself, or perhaps been sorted, into zones, human zones, where order mostly prevails, and other zones, where it doesn't, where the entities of chaos hold sway, where the fracture in reality is more visible, more tangible, more dangerous. This isn't the world that was intended. In the beginning, all of creation was meant to be a garden, all of it meant to be ordered and good. But after the falls, after the rebellions, after the corruptions, the map has changed. Now there are places you avoid, ruins you don't explore, wildernesses you don't enter, because the spiritual reality of those places is compromised, haunted, dangerous. The satyr demons dance in fallen Babylon. The night creatures nest in the ruins of Edom. And travelers who must pass through such places do so quickly, carefully, aware that they're surrounded by more than just empty buildings and desert sand. This is what the world has become. Not just corrupted, but sorted, divided, with some places safer than others. Some landscapes more spiritually dangerous than others. The physical world now reflecting the spiritual fractures that run through all of reality. Let this image settle as you rest. But don't let it frighten you. You are not in the wilderness now. Not in the ruins. You are in a human space. An ordered space. A place where the boundaries hold and the dangerous things are kept at bay. The wilderness is out there. Yes. The haunted places exist. But you don't have to go there. And even if you did, you would go prepared, protected, aware, not wandering blindly into danger. The map has changed, but you know how to read it now. You know which places to avoid, which landscapes to respect, where the borders lie between the ordered and the chaotic. Sleep peacefully, in your ordered space, your safe space. Let the ruins and wilderness remain distant, and trust that the walls and boundaries that protect you hold firm through the night. A face emerges from the shadows. out of the general darkness, out of the swarm of unnamed Mazzikim and the vague entities of the wilderness, something begins to take shape, a figure, a name, a specific presence that the tradition will come to know and fear. Lilith. The word appears only once in the Hebrew Bible. A single reference in Isaiah's prophecy about Edom becoming a wasteland, among the wild animals and eerie creatures that will inhabit the ruins. There she is. Or it is. The translation is uncertain. Night creature, some versions say. Screech owl, say others. But the Hebrew says, Lilith. And that single mention, that one appearance in the prophetic text, became the seed of something much larger, much more elaborate, much more personal. In the later Jewish tradition, in the folklore and the magical texts, in the incantation bowls found by archaeologists, Lilith grows, develops, becomes not just a vague night creature, but a specific demonic figure, with a story, with characteristics, with a particular kind of danger she represents. She becomes, in these traditions, the mother of demons, the strangler of infants, the seductress of men, a female demon of particular power and particular threat. Why Lilith? Why did this one obscure reference spawn such an elaborate mythology? Perhaps because people need specifics, need names, need to know exactly what they're protecting against. The Mazzikim are everywhere, but they're faceless, anonymous. Lilith. Lilith has a face, an identity, a specific set of dangers to guard against. Or perhaps because Lilith represents something archetypal, something about the fear of the feminine, the dangerous woman, the mother who harms instead of protects, the beauty that destroys. These fears found their expression in her figure. The incantation bowls tell us much. These are physical artifacts. Clay bowls inscribed with magical formulas, buried under houses or placed in corners of rooms. Protective magic. And Lilith is named in them. Repeatedly. Specifically. Flee from this house, Lilith. We adjure you by the Great Seal. Do not harm the children born to this family. The bowls speak to her directly, as if she might be listening, as if she could be commanded, or at least, requested to leave. And she's not alone in these incantation texts. There are references to multiple Lilith-type demons, female night spirits, each with slight variations, each dangerous in her own way. But Lilith herself, she's the primary one, the queen of this particular category of threat. What does she do? According to the tradition, she comes in the night. She threatens newborns, particularly male infants in their first days of life. She seduces men in their sleep, causing nocturnal emissions, taking their seed to create more demons. These are intimate threats, domestic threats, things that happen in the vulnerability of night, in the privacy of homes, in the moments when people are most defenseless. This is different from the Mazzikim who cause accidents, different from the wilderness spirits who inhabit ruins. Lilith comes into human spaces, into bedrooms, into the most protected and private areas of life. And there, she works her harm. The protective measures against her are elaborate. Don't leave an infant alone in the house. Draw circles around the bed. Write protective names on the walls. Hang amulets with specific angelic names that have power over her. In some versions of her story, 3 angels pursued Lilith and forced her to swear that she would avoid any place where she saw their names. So parents would write those angelic names, Sinoi, Sansonoi, and Samangeloff, around their children's beds, hoping that Lilith, remembering her oath, would pass by. It's fascinating, isn't it? How specific this has become. Not just demons threaten babies, but Lilith threatens babies, unless you invoke these 3 specific angels whose name she fears. Chaos has become personal, named, knowable, and therefore, potentially manageable. But there's something darker here too. Something about the evolution of evil in human consciousness. Lilith represents evil that is intimate, targeted, specifically aimed at what humans love most. Their children, their families, their most private selves. The Watchers fell. The Babel builders transformed. The Mazzikim swarm. The wilderness grew haunted. And now, from all of that general corruption, a specific figure emerges. With a name. With a face. With a particular kind of malice. Some traditions connect her to Eden. Say she was Adam's first wife. Before Eve. That she refused to be subservient and fled, choosing demonhood over submission. This isn't in the Bible, but it's in the later elaborations. It gives her a backstory, an origin, a reason for her particular hostility toward human families. If this tradition is believed, then Lilith represents yet another rebellion, another refusal to accept the cosmic order. She was meant to be the mother of humanity, and instead chose to become the mother of demons. She was meant to protect infants, and instead became their primary threat. The pattern repeats. Angels refuse their role. Humans refuse their role. And now even the first woman, in some traditions, refuses her role. Each rebellion echoing and amplifying the last. But here's what's most striking about Lilith's emergence in the tradition. She works as a concept, as a focus for protective magic, as a named thing that can be warded against. Parents genuinely believed that knowing Lilith's name, knowing her nature, knowing the angels that had power over her, actually kept their children safer. The specificity itself was protective. When evil is vague, it's terrifying. It's everywhere and nowhere. It's unstoppable because you don't know what you're stopping. But when evil has a name, when it has a specific mode of operation, when there are known methods to guard against it, then humans can act, can protect, can exert some control over the chaos. Lilith, for all her menace, is therefore almost a gift, a crystallization of diffuse threat into something specific enough to defend against. The chaos has become personal, but in becoming personal, it has also become vulnerable. Lilith can be named, can be adjured, can be commanded to flee. Her power, real as it may be, is not absolute. And so the incantation bowls multiply. Households invest in protection. Parents learn the proper names and formulas. The community shares knowledge about how to keep Lilith at bay. This is humanity adapting again. Just as we learned to manage the Mazzikim, now we learn to guard against Lilith. The threat is more specific, more targeted, more personal, but also more knowable, more manageable. The face that has emerged from the shadows is frightening. Yes. But it's a face we can see, a presence we can name, a danger we can prepare for. And in a strange way, that's progress. Not progress toward eliminating the threat. The tradition doesn't suggest Lilith can be destroyed or permanently banished, but progress toward living with the threat, toward protecting what we love despite the dangers that prowl the night. Lilith remains. In the ruins during the day, perhaps, but near human homes at night, waiting for opportunities, looking for unprotected infants, seeking men who sleep alone and vulnerable. But she is known now, named now, and the naming itself is a form of power. Not complete power, not victory, but enough. Enough to protect most of the children most of the time. Enough to give families a sense of control in a chaotic world. The shadows have produced a face, and that face is terrible. But it's also, in a strange way, almost comforting. Because at least now we know what we're looking at. Rest now, knowing that the threats have names, that the dangers can be identified, that protective measures exist. Lilith prowls. Yes. But you know her name. You know the angels who have power over her. You know how to guard what you love. The face in the shadows is no longer entirely mysterious, and that, in this fractured world, is the closest thing to comfort we might find. Sleep peacefully, protected, named, own, and therefore, as safe as anyone can be, in a world where chaos has become personal. Demonic hierarchy forms. Lilith is not alone. This becomes clear as the traditions develop, as the magical texts accumulate, as the incantation bowls are inscribed with more and more names. She's powerful, she's feared, but she's not the only one. And more than that, she's not entirely independent. There are others. Other female night spirits. Other demons with similar characteristics and similar threats. The sources sometimes call them Liliths. Plural. As if Lilith is both a specific being and a category. A type of demon that has multiple instances. And then, in some of the Aramaic incantation texts, another name appears. Dana, a male demon. And the texts give him a title, King of the Liliths. Think about what this means. What it implies about how the demonic realm has organized itself. There's a hierarchy, a structure, a chain of command. Just as the heavenly temple had its orders of angels, each with their proper place and function. So now the demonic realm, this corruption of the divine order, has developed its own hierarchy. Dana rules over Lilith and her sisters, these female demons of the night, these threats to children and men. They don't act entirely independently. They have a king, a leader, someone who coordinates, or perhaps commands, their actions. This is both troubling and oddly reassuring. Troubling because it suggests organization, planning, coordinated evil rather than just random chaos. The demons aren't just wandering aimlessly causing whatever trouble they stumble into. They have structure, leadership, purpose. But it's also reassuring, because hierarchy means rules. It means there are beings who have authority. And beings with authority can potentially be negotiated with, commanded, controlled through proper magical formulas. If you know Dana's name, if you know he has authority over the Liliths, then you can address your protective spells to him, command him to restrain his subjects, appeal to the structure of the demonic realm itself for protection. The incantation bowls that name Dana do exactly this. They adjure him by various powers, by the Great Seal, by divine names, by angelic authorities, and they command him, as king, to keep his Liliths away from this household. It's remarkable. Really, the demons have organized themselves into a mirror of heavenly order. Not a perfect mirror. More like a reflection in dark water. Distorted, inverted, but recognizably patterned after the same template. Heaven has its hierarchies. Angels organized into orders and ranks. Cherubim and seraphim. Powers and principalities. Each with their sphere of influence and authority. And now the demonic realm has its hierarchies too. Kings like Dana ruling over categories of demons. Lilith perhaps subordinate to him, yet powerful in her own right. Other demons presumably organized in other ways under other authorities. This suggests something profound about how evil works. It's parasitic. It can't create its own structures, its own patterns. So it mimics. It copies. It creates twisted versions of divine order. The heavenly temple was perfect order. Angels serving in perfect harmony. The demonic hierarchy is a corruption of that. Order used for harmful purposes. Authority wielded for destruction rather than protection. But it's still, in a dark way, order. Not pure chaos. Not randomness. The demons may be evil. But they're not anarchic. They have their kings and their subjects, their rulers and they're ruled. And this creates opportunities for those who understand the system. If you know the hierarchy, Know who rules what. Know the names of the authorities. You can work within that structure. Use it. Leverage it for protection. The magical texts show this clearly. They don't just throw random names and commands at the demons. They're strategic, precise. They address the right authorities. They invoke the proper chains of command. Dana, king of the Liliths, we command you by the seal of Solomon to restrain your subjects from this household. The formula recognizes his authority, uses it, turns it into a tool for human protection. This is very different from the earlier stages of corruption we've discussed. The Watchers fell in a moment of collective rebellion. The Babel builders transformed in a moment of divine judgment. The Mazzikim just exist, swarm, cause trouble without apparent coordination. But this is organized evil, structured evil, evil that has had time to settle into patterns, to develop hierarchies, to create systems. And that development tells us something about the passage of time, about how corruption evolves. It starts with dramatic rebellions and falls. Then it becomes endemic, ambient, and eventually, it organizes itself, creates institutions, establishes rules and ranks. The demonic realm, by the time these incantation texts are being written, isn't new anymore. It's established. It has a history, a structure, a culture of its own. Dana didn't just appear one day and declare himself king. Presumably, he rose to that position somehow. Through power, through cunning, through whatever processes allow one demon to dominate others. And now he rules. And his rule is recognized, even by humans trying to protect themselves from him. There's something almost businesslike about these magical formulas. They're not emotional, not pleading. They're procedural. We recognize your authority, Dana. Now use that authority to control your subordinates. We command you by powers greater than yours to enforce this command. It's supernatural bureaucracy, navigating the hierarchies of the unseen world with the same attention to proper channels and chains of command that you'd use in any large organization. And it worked. Or at least, people believed it worked. Otherwise, why would the practice continue? Why would household after household invest in incantation bowls? Why would scribes specialize in writing these formulas? The very existence of these texts, these bowls, these carefully inscribed names and commands, tells us that people found them effective. That knowing the hierarchy, knowing Dana was king of the Liliths, actually helped protect their families. This is the world fully adapted to corruption, not fighting against evil as an external enemy, but learning to navigate it, to work within its structures, to use its own hierarchies as tools for protection. It's not victory. The demons aren't defeated. Dana still rules. Lilith still prowls. The hierarchy of darkness still exists and functions. But humans have learned to live within this reality, to understand it well enough to protect themselves, to map the invisible structures of the demonic realm and use that map to find safety. The hierarchy of heaven, angels serving in perfect order, has its dark reflection in the hierarchy of demons. Kings and subjects, rulers and ruled, authority and obedience, but all bent toward harm rather than good. Yet even this twisted hierarchy, this corruption of divine order, can be navigated, can be understood, can be leveraged for protection by those who know the names, the structures, the chains of command. Dana rules the Liliths, but he himself is subject to higher powers, to divine names, to angelic authorities, to the seal of Solomon. His hierarchy is real, but it's not ultimate. It exists within a larger order, one that still, ultimately, serves the good. And so the incantation bowls work, because they appeal to that larger order. They recognize Dana's authority, then invoke authorities higher than his. They work within the demonic hierarchy, but also work around it, calling on powers that even demon kings must obey. This is the stage where chaos has become almost manageable, not eliminated, not defeated, but understood well enough to navigate. The demons have their hierarchies, but so do we. And we've learned to play one hierarchy against another, to find protection in the gaps and overlaps of authority. Rest now, knowing that even the organized evil, the structured chaos, the hierarchy of darkness, is not beyond understanding, not beyond navigation. The demons have their kings, but those kings have their limits, their authorities, their boundaries. You are not defenseless, even against organized evil. The names are known. The hierarchies are mapped. The protective formulas exist. And they work, have worked, will continue to work, as long as someone remembers to speak them. Sleep peacefully, in a world where even the darkness has structure, and that structure, ironically, creates the very weaknesses through which light can shine. Ancient chaos monsters resurface. There are older stories, deeper stories, stories that existed before the biblical texts were written, myths that circulated among the peoples of the ancient Near East, Mesopotamia, Canaan, Ugarit, stories about the beginning of the world, about how order came from chaos. And at the center of many of these stories, there is a monster, a serpent, a dragon of the sea, a creature of primordial chaos that must be defeated before creation can properly begin. The Canaanites called him Latan, a seven-headed serpent of the sea, twisted, powerful, the embodiment of watery chaos. And in their myths, the storm god, Baal, does battle with Latan, defeats him, establishes order over chaos. This is an old pattern, one that appears in culture after culture. The chaos monster, the dragon in the deep, the serpent that represents everything wild and untamed about reality, and the God who conquers it. The biblical writers knew these stories. They lived in a world where these myths were common cultural knowledge. And when they wrote about God's creative power, about divine sovereignty, they reached for imagery that their audience would recognize. They spoke of Leviathan, not the same as Latan, but clearly related. The name is similar. The characteristics are similar. A great sea creature, powerful, frightening, associated with chaos and the untamable ocean. But there's a crucial difference in how the biblical text treats Leviathan compared to how the older myths treated Latan. In the Canaanite myths, Baal's victory over Latan is hard-won, dramatic, violent. It's a real battle, a genuine struggle between comparable forces. The storm god wins, but it's not effortless. In the biblical text, God doesn't really fight Leviathan. God created Leviathan, plays with Leviathan. Job describes God as the one who made Leviathan to frolic in the sea. The Psalms speak of Leviathan as something God formed for his own purposes, even for his own amusement. There's no battle, no struggle. God's supremacy over the chaos monster is absolute, effortless, not even worth describing as a conflict. This is a radical reinterpretation. The biblical writers took a cultural image that everyone knew, the chaos serpent, the dragon of the deep, and they demoted it. They reduced its significance. They made it clear that this thing, this Leviathan, impressive as it might seem to humans, is nothing compared to God. And yet, they kept the image, kept the name, kept the association with primordial chaos. Because the image still works, still communicates something important about the nature of reality. There is chaos in the world. That's undeniable. There are forces that seem wild, untamable, dangerous. The ocean itself, in the ancient world, represented this. Unpredictable, powerful, capable of destroying ships and swallowing cities. Leviathan, in the biblical imagination, becomes the symbol of all that. Not a being that threatens God, but a being that represents everything that threatens humans. Everything wild and dangerous in creation. And the message is clear. God has authority over even this. The most chaotic, the most frightening, the most seemingly untamable aspects of reality are under divine control. The book of Job describes Leviathan in detail. His scales, his power, his fearsome nature. Nothing on earth is his equal. A creature without fear. He looks down on all that are haughty. He is king over all that are proud. It's almost poetry, almost admiration for the creature's magnificence. But it's framed within God's speech to Job. God is saying, "Look at this amazing creature. You couldn't possibly contend with him. But I made him. I control him. I set his boundaries." This is reaffirmation of order. Even when chaos seems most impressive, most powerful, most threatening, it's not actually ultimate. It doesn't rule. It doesn't set the terms of existence. God does. And this matters, because after everything we've discussed, all the falls and rebellions and corruptions, all the demons and hierarchies and haunted wildernesses, there's a danger of thinking chaos has won, that order has failed, that the fractures are permanent and unfixable. But Leviathan, this ancient chaos monster resurfacing in biblical text, reminds us otherwise. Yes, chaos exists. Yes, it's real. Yes, it's frightening. But it's not in charge. God's supremacy over Leviathan is effortless, which means God's supremacy over all the lesser chaotic forces, the fallen angels, the transformed humans, the swarms of Mazzikim, the hierarchies of demons, is equally assured. They exist, but they exist within boundaries, within limits set by a power so much greater than theirs that comparison is almost meaningless. This is why the image of Leviathan is comforting, rather than frightening. Yes, there's a seven-headed chaos serpent in the cosmic ocean. And yes, from a human perspective, that's terrifying. But from the divine perspective, it's a pet, a plaything, something created for God's own purposes, even for God's amusement. The chaos is contained, not eliminated, but contained. Leviathan swims in the sea, but he swims where God allows him to swim. He is king over all that is proud, but he himself is subject to the King of Kings. This pattern repeats in other biblical passages. Rahab, another chaos monster, is mentioned as something God defeated with ease. The Tannin, the sea dragons, creatures God made. Behemoth, Leviathan's land-based counterpart, is the first of God's works. Mighty, but still created, still under divine authority. The message is consistent. Chaos monsters exist. Forces of disorder are real. But they're not equals to the divine. They're not even close. And if God has such effortless supremacy over Leviathan, over the ancient chaos serpent that terrified entire cultures, then all the lesser evils we've discussed, all the demons and spirits and corruptions, are even more surely under divine control. They may trouble us. Yes. They may cause harm within the boundaries they're allowed. But they're allowed, permitted, operating within constraints they didn't set and can't break. This is the cosmic context that the ancient believers held in their minds. Yes, the world is fractured. Yes, evil is real. Yes, demons exist and hierarchies of darkness function and chaos is genuinely present. But above all that, behind all that, prior to all that, is an order that chaos cannot overthrow, a power that chaos cannot threaten, a God who speaks, and Leviathan obeys. The chaos serpent, this image from the deepest mythic past, resurfaces in biblical text not as a threat, but as a demonstration. Look how impressive chaos can be, and look how completely unimpressed God is by it. Leviathan is magnificent, fearsome, powerful, and also utterly subordinate, completely controlled, never for a moment beyond the reach of divine authority. This changes everything, doesn't it? All the demonic hierarchies, all the invisible threats, all the wilderness spirits and night demons. They're less than Leviathan, much less. And Leviathan is God's plaything. So rest now, in the knowledge that the chaos, real as it is contained. The monsters, frightening as they are controlled. The ancient serpent of disorder, impressive as he seems, frolics in the sea exactly where and when God permits. The order is deeper than the chaos, older than the chaos, stronger than the chaos. And that order, that divine sovereignty, holds everything in its proper place. Even the seven-headed serpent, even Leviathan himself, even the ancient symbol of primordial disorder, serves the purposes of the one who created him. Sleep peacefully, knowing that every chaos monster, every demon, every spirit, every force of disorder, exists only by permission, and that permission can be, at any moment, revoked. The chaos is real, but the control is realer, and that makes all the difference. The sky holds its own mythic ruler. We've journeyed from heaven to earth, from the ordered temple above to the chaotic world below. We've watched as angels fell, humans rebelled, demons organized, and chaos monsters surfaced from the primordial deep. But there's one realm we haven't yet explored, one dimension of creation that holds its own mythic ruler. Look up, above the land, above even the sea, into the vast expanse of sky. And there, according to the later Jewish traditions, rules Ziz. Ziz is less well known than Leviathan, less frequently mentioned than Behemoth. But in the cosmic geography that developed in rabbinic thought, Ziz has his place, his role, his domain. Leviathan rules the sea, Behemoth rules the land, and Ziz rules the sky. The three great beasts, each dominating one realm of creation, each representing the power and mystery of their element. Together they span the entirety of the created world. Land and air. But where does Ziz come from? His origins are subtle, obscure, hidden in the Hebrew text itself. In Genesis, when God creates the flying creatures, the text uses a phrase that can be translated as all that moves or all that flies. It's a collective term, broad, encompassing, meant to indicate the teeming abundance of winged life. But later tradition, looking at that phrase, seeing a word that could be a name, Ziz, began to wonder, what if it's not just a description? What if it's also a name? What if that phrase, all that moves, also hints at a specific creature? A singular bird so vast, so powerful, so significant, that it represents all flying things? And so Ziz was born, or rather, discovered, excavated from the text, a mythic bird of enormous proportions, a creature whose wings could block out the sun, whose feet stood on earth while his head reached the heavens. In some descriptions, an egg once fell from Ziz's nest, and the egg was so large that when it broke, the flood of albumin destroyed 300 cedar trees and inundated 60 cities. These are mythic proportions, not meant to be taken as literal natural history, but meant to communicate scale, power, the awesome magnitude of the wild sky itself. Ziz is, in a way, the least threatening of the three great beasts. Leviathan is explicitly fearsome. Behemoth is dangerous. But Ziz is more magnificent than menacing, more awesome than awful. Perhaps because the sky feels more distant than sea or land, more removed from human concerns. Leviathan could swallow ships. Behemoth could trample settlements. But Ziz flies above, beyond reach, beyond threat, simply enormous. And yet, his inclusion in the cosmic scheme is important, because it completes the picture. It says that every realm of creation, every dimension of the world we inhabit, has its mythic scale, its numinous power, its sense of containing something beyond ordinary comprehension. Look at the sea, and there is Leviathan. Look at the land, and there is Behemoth. Look at the sky, and there is Ziz. No realm is empty of wonder. No dimension is purely mundane. The world, even in its fractured state, even with all its fallen angels and organized demons and haunted wildernesses, the world is still full of magnificence. And these three creatures, in the rabbinic imagination, serve a specific eschatological purpose. At the end of days, when God establishes the final kingdom, when all things are restored, there will be a feast, and at this feast, the righteous will eat the flesh of Leviathan, Behemoth, and Ziz. The great beasts themselves will become sustenance. The powers that once represented chaos and wildness will be transformed into nourishment for the redeemed. It's a striking image. The monsters tamed, not just defeated, but transformed into something that sustains life. The chaos itself redeemed, repurposed, made to serve the purposes of restoration. This is the final word, the ultimate reassurance. Yes, the chaos monsters exist. Yes, they're real and powerful and span the entirety of creation. Sea and land and sky all have their great beasts. But even these, even Leviathan and Behemoth and Ziz, even these ultimate symbols of untamed power, will one day serve the feast of restoration, will be transformed from threats into blessings. The story that began with perfect order in the heavenly temple, that descended through falls and rebellions and corruptions, that populated the world with demons and spirits and invisible threats, that revealed hierarchies of darkness and haunted wildernesses and chaos monsters. This story ends with a feast. Transformation, not just destruction. Redemption, not just judgment. The great beasts themselves, changed, made clean, prepared as food for those who endured, who persisted, who remained faithful through all the chaos. Ziz represents the completion of this vision. The sky, that vast realm above us, has its own power, its own mystery, its own ruler. But that ruler, like all the others, is ultimately under divine authority, and will ultimately serve divine purposes. When you look up at the sky now, at the endless expanse of blue or the darkness scattered with stars, remember Ziz. Remember that even this vast realm, even this seemingly infinite space, is part of the cosmic order, has its place, its purpose, its role in the grand design. The three realms, the three beasts, the complete picture of a world that is both fallen and magnificent, corrupted and wonderful, full of threats and full of beauty. We live in this world, this complicated reality where angels have fallen but order still holds, where demons have organized but remain limited, where chaos monsters exist but cannot overthrow divine sovereignty. We live between the perfect order that was intended and the perfect restoration that is promised. In the meantime, in this middle time, the world is complex, dangerous, full of invisible threats and visible wonders. But it's navigable. We've learned how. We've developed our protections, our incantations, our ways of living safely in dangerous territory. We know the names, understand the hierarchies, respect the boundaries, and we know, because the tradition tells us, that this isn't forever. The great beasts will one day be tamed. The chaos will be transformed. The feast of restoration will come. Until then, we live with awareness, with care, with protection, but also with hope. Because the story that includes Leviathan and Behemoth and Ziz also includes their transformation, their redemption, their service to the kingdom that is coming. The sky holds its mythic ruler. Yes. The sea has its serpent and the land has its beast. The world is full of powers beyond our complete understanding. But it's also, ultimately, in good hands. Divine hands that created Leviathan as a plaything, that set Behemoth in his place, that gave Ziz the sky to rule, and that will one day transform all of this into the feast of restoration. Rest now, in this complete vision, this full picture of reality. Complex, yes. Dangerous, yes. But also beautiful, ordered beneath the chaos, purposeful beneath the confusion, and heading, inevitably, toward restoration. The mythic rulers of sea and land and sky exist, but they're not the final word, not the ultimate power, not the end of the story. They're part of it, important parts, parts that teach us about the nature of reality, about power and limitation, about chaos and control, about how even the most impressive creatures, the most fearsome beasts, the most magnificent powers, are subject to something greater. Sleep peacefully now, under the sky where Ziz rules, on the land where Behemoth roams, near the sea where Leviathan swims. All three realms, all three beasts, all three dimensions of creation, held in the same cosmic order that holds you. You are safe, not because there are no monsters, but because the monsters have their limits.